Good morning, everyone, and welcome to GPA Trading Services live trading class on this Tuesday, February 23rd, 2016. Wow, what a day. Now, I hope all of you had a lovely weekend and all is doing well on your end. And you're geared up for this week's classes. This is a big week for the Albrecht family. So nice we can share it with you guys. And let me give a big shout out to our dear friends in Archive Land as well. Now let's just jump right on in and get going. So without further ado, please sit back, relax, and enjoy. And I'll turn it over to Gary and we'll begin. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Would you please join me in wishing Trish a happy birthday? Today is the birthday girl. So please join me in wishing her a happy birthday. And in honor of this momentous occasion, we have a beautiful cake. It says, "Happy birthday, my beautiful wife, Trish N. Albrecht." And it's a lovely cake. Too lovely to cut, in fact. So thank you everyone for wishing her a happy birthday. So as we move on, as you know, today is Tuesday, Gary's Market Forecast, or GMF. It's the heads up on what's going down in the markets. But first, we have very specific rules of engagement. Those include the following. Do not trade with money you cannot afford to lose. Always trade with protective stops. Make certain the 4-hour, the 1-hour, the 30, and the 15-minute time frames align prior to trading with the MPA PE3 software. Also adhere to very strict money management rules, which include never risking more than 2% of your entire account balance on any one given trade. For options friends, never risk more than 5% of your entire account balance on any one given options trade. And finally, all information provided by GPA Trading Services is for your educational purposes. So please give me a moment as I open up the charts. Okay, let's pick up with the euro. The euro, to no one's surprise, ladies and gentlemen, is grinding its way down towards at least our initial target of 109.50/108.50. And we believe that this is going to take, regardless if it's 2 going down in 3 or C going down in D, it should take several more weeks as we grind down in an A or a W, up in a B or an X, down in a C and a Y. That would be perfect for this C going down in D. So even if it turns out to be the least of the big moves, meaning that it's C going down in D first, we're going to expect once it completes D, it will go up and rally towards the finish E to ultimately complete this wave B. Well, again, if it happens to where this wave B is already done, and we're in the midst of a 1-2 working on a 3 down, then we're going to expect price will consistently go lower and lower and lower in a stair-stepping affair. So it's not unlikely to have several up days during this little retracement period, and then have some up days, down days, but ultimately stair-stepping much lower, including breaking 105.19, 104.61, and below. So again, James, it doesn't matter if it's 2 going down in 3 or C going down in D. The daily trend momentum in PAI we're turning down. And for the last several days, Al, we should be thinking about selling rallies in a downtrend, not so much buying dips in an uptrend. Knowing that while the daily trend momentum and PAI are headed down, if we do decide to take a long trade, we must know in advance our strategy and tactic is going to be what? To scalp it, and then look for my opportunity to sell that rally and look for further downside. So let's check the software and see where we are. Our 4-hour, to no one's surprise, James Brown, has been slingshotting lower and lower and lower and lower and lower and lower, over and over and over and over and over and over, as the daily continues to move from overbought territory down into oversold. There was a period during this little move where the red started to flatten out. Blue slightly changed angle, but we never truly had an engaging slingshot up. So there was no way to buy a daily slingshot up. And even if it did, based on that scenario, we would look to buy it, yes. But now that my weekly is starting to turn over and re-engage, we talked about this as well. We engaged, we disengaged, and we could re-engage as the daily would start to move from overbought toward oversold. And so far, that's exactly what we're seeing. So, should we, in the coming days, have the daily organized enough to slingshot up, while in fact that weekly is slingshotting down, then of course we're going to expect what? That daily slingshot to the upside should fail, and I would end up with a high, a low, slingshotting up, making a lower high, ultimately failing and continuing to move from overbought down and oversold, allowing the weekly to continue to play out. Well, today is Tuesday, wonderful day for Trisha's birthday, but as we move into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we will expect as we go into next week, if that daily continues, Al, its journey from overbought to oversold the rest of this week, then obviously the weekly will stay engaging, and more than likely not only stay engaging, but by next week we should see the trend momentum crossing down as well. So we could end up in one of these that not only starts engaging down, but ends up pulling the trend momentum from overbought and starts its journey moving back toward oversold. Well, that's too early to confirm that. Thank you, Stacy, for your and everyone else for their well wishes. And as this is turning over, Stacy, this is going to be a sign and symptom that is this down move truly ready to commit? Meaning the weekly does not only start engaging as it's doing, but continues to stay engaging week after week after week, moving lower and lower and lower, which then in turn causes the trend momentum to cross over. Well, a sign the trend momentum's ready to cross is when the Aquaman pulls down and crosses below, from above down below the yellow line. That will represent the trend momentum 1 crossing to the downside. So that's something to keep an eye on. Well, obviously, that my weekly should stay engaging for as long as my daily stays pointing down. So Al, what's the motto? It's to continue to sell the rallies in the downtrend and expect the euro will continue to grind lower and lower and lower and lower in a what? Stair-stepping affair. Why stair-stepping? Because the lower time frames are going to be required to depressurize to go back towards overbought, while the daily stays pushing lower towards oversold and will continue to look to do what? Sell 4-hour slingshots. So your trade alert on the euro is to continue to sell 4-hour slingshots, not for once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. It's for as many as unfolds while the daily trend momentum and PAI are down. And clearly, we have angling separation on trend momentum 1 and 2. And as far as the PAI, red did flatten out for a short period, but it's angling back down. Blue and green, money flow, are both headed back down. And this is a strong sign and symptom we're going to get further downside. Well, they can be some little rallies along the way. You expect it when the lower time frames start to bottom and reverse. Excuse me. As we can see, we're seeing some sideways movement. And remember our little scenario, if we go back to a larger time frame, the euro did exactly for us as we, well, that's a little bit too high a time frame, but we're watching, what did the 4 hour do? We had leg 1, consolidation, leg 2. We're in the midst of consolidation again, and I would expect another leg down. Right? We had a nice push lower, sideways movement, another push lower. We're working on some sideways movement, and we're going to look to push lower again. Well, if I'm short, and I've been short on this, and I still have some wiggle room, meaning I have several lots on, I could peel off a little profit, sure, But I'm also expecting that this down move is going to start to move and start depressurizing again toward the upside, because the 4-hour will need its time to depressurize. And as we look the 4 hours clearly in oversold territory, the 1 hour is making its final descent into overbought territory, oversold territory. 4 hour, let me repeat that, 4 hours in oversold territory, having slingshotted lower and lower and lower multiple times, and again has slingshotted to make a new low into and return back to oversold territory. The 1 hour is on its final descent from moving from oversold back towards overbought and slingshotting down as well as it's moving back to oversold territory. The 30, as you can imagine, made its move from oversold to overbought during the correction, and from overbought back to oversold during that 4-hour slingshot, and is starting to depressurize. My 15 has done the same, overbought, oversold, overbought, oversold, and it will continue to stair step along the way. And yes, I do expect the euro to grind a little lower, but we may not get a new low below this morning's low, because my 1530, 1 hour, and 4 hour are oversold, meaning they need to start depressurizing as we see representation on the 15, the 30, and of course the 1 hour. So yes, we may see a little more downside slightly, even if we do make a new lower low. I would not expect it to be a massive amounts of lower low. I'd expect to see more of this chopping, overlapping sideways to perhaps even a little more upwards direction once this little time frame is finished. I would look for the 1 hour turning up, a 30 depressurizing. We may likely see that fail, turn and hook up, and continue this chopping, overlapping scenario. But bottom line is you want to continue to sell the 4-hour slingshot, and it was a beauty on this last slingshot, the big one, and the most recent one we did this morning, another smaller slingshot, but it moved in relation to about 110.50 down to a low of 109.90, 109.89. So it still made about 60 pips on this small slingshot. So we could continue to look to sell rallies, Al, James, because the daily is clearly pointing down. Trend momentum PAI, and as we stated last week and the week before, once our daily finally would turn, so you remember when we had this little up move going, we said once the daily would finally turn again and move to oversold, from overbought toward oversold, we expected this weekly slingshot would re-engage. So my daily went from oversold towards overbought, went from overbought down toward oversold, and it engaged down for a few weeks, chopping mostly sideways, but still gave us a nice few hundred pip move down. Then when the daily reversed and went back up, this weekly slingshot disengaged and went higher, and for the few weeks we had higher prices as we expected to go higher and higher, sure, but once again we were talking about that daily turning over. And once it turned over, and should it start to move from overbought toward oversold, we expected the weekly would re-engage. And so far, we have dropped several hundreds of pips from our swing point high of 1374 to our swing point low of 109.80. So we've moved almost 400 pips in that so far of a downward trend as my daily moves from overbought to oversold, and now my weekly is being pulled with it. So all signs and symptoms should continue to keep your eyes on selling rallies in a downtrend, expecting the euro will grind lower, perhaps even for several more days as the daily finishes its downward cycle. Once we get the daily bottoming and reversing, eventually the daily will reverse back up. That's its job. So remember, what is the job of the trend momentum in the PAI? It's to go from oversold toward overbought, overbought back towards oversold, oversold back towards overbought, overbought back towards oversold. Trend momentum as well should go from oversold towards overbought, overbought towards oversold, back towards overbought, back towards oversold. And the only time this process is interrupted on the trend momentum moving from one extreme to the other is via this slingshot phenomenon. Okay? So, based on what we're seeing, there's no reason to believe the euro won't continue to go lower, and that fits in perfectly with our structure. Whether or not it's 2 going down in 3 or it's C going down in D, we still expect further downside, then a correction up, and then further down again, even if it means it's the C going down in D. Everybody clear on that? So even though I expect to have some sort of rally to the upside in a B or X wave, depending on if it's a combination or flat, or depending on what this turns out to be, it's still unfolding in its initial leg down. And once it's over, we're going to get some sort of rally to the upside. It depends what type of correction. Yes, the euro could rally significantly back up if it turns out it's like a flat correction or an even expanded flat. Or if it's not, it ends up being a zigzag or several other types of combination corrections. Then we could see that it makes a nice rally up, but nowhere near the previous high, and then continues to move lower. So the bias would be this. If I wanted to paint the picture looking at this chart here and tell you what the software should look like, we're going to look just as we said here. We said, well, based on the potential of wave 2 ending, moving in 3, or C ending, moving down in D, we wanted to see the daily trend momentum in PAI flip. At that point, we would consider this potentially being complete, and either way, we expected it would start to move down. So far, day after day after day after day after day, we see numerous down day candles with one little up day, and my daily is still moving from overbought to oversold. So let's fill in the blanks. Well, when do we think this potential A or W wave could be complete? When my daily starts to turn back up. Either, Stacy, via a slingshot back up, or a bottom reversal of the trend momentum and the PAI, both bottoming and reversing, moving higher, and that could lead us down in for an A, a B, or a WX. And of course, as I watch the daily start depressurizing, yes, I'm going to expect probably a few days of upside pressure, but the key will be at that point in time when I'm watching the daily bottom and reverse, the key is going to be to watch how the weekly slingshot that's engaging down reacts to the daily's depressurization. Meaning, does it start to disengage like it's done before, or does it stay engaging? Well, clearly, William Bruce, let's take the scenario where the daily bottoms and reverses, and the weekly says, nope, I'm engaging down, and no matter what you do as you depressurize, I'm staying engaging. Then, of course, we're going to look for the daily to depressurize, then slingshot lower in the coming days because the weekly doesn't join forces. Well, Gary, what if the daily starts to turn and depressurize and the weekly does disengage? Then it's likely to be maybe expanded flat or a flat correction or expanded flat, meaning we could grind all the way back up that 400, 500 pips, depends on where we bottom and reverse. We could grind the majority of that, or if not, even a little bit more, to be part of that A, B way up here and still come down in C. So everyone see how the potential wave counts could play out. Well, that could be a short B here and a short X, or, just one second. Or we could have an expanded flat or flat correction that moves this B, the majority, at least 90% of this move, and even an expanded flat can move beyond that and make an actual higher high before then moving lower. So far the signs and symptoms have been spot on. We said this move up should end and a reversal should start with a downtrend once the daily trend momentum in PAI flipped. So far, so good. And as the daily would start to move from overbought to oversold, we expected the weekly would join forces. So now remember this picture about down in A or W, up in B or X, and then down in C or Y. That's taking consideration C going down in D. Well, what if it's the same here, that this is the beginning of an A, B, and a C, and we come way down here, blowing past 105.19. then we would look at that being a 1-2 going down in 3. And ultimately, the only change in that picture would be that, yes, this B wave is considered done here, unfolding in C, versus this sideways movement in a larger triangle, completing over to the right, then starting its long descent to a wave C down. But either way, we're either in the midst of a C down or we're going to be in the midst of a C down. And no matter how we slice this, we're not expecting price to go breaking way up to the upside. We're expecting price to eventually start breaking down below 105, 104.61, working its way towards parity and below as we ultimately head down and complete this wave count. Now, the beauty of this, as we go back to the software, everyone, is, Al, that's what I say every day. I give you potential wave count, and it doesn't matter if this is 2 going down in 3 or C going down in D. We know that we expected it to be in and start moving in a downtrend, the uptrend over, the downtrend starting when the daily trend momentum in PAI finally turned. Right? And since it started to turn and move lower day after day after day after day after day after day after day, it's still moving lower. And yes, it was able, as we expected, it would force the weekly to engage back down. Now, this is no guarantee that the daily, when it bottoms and reverses, won't force it to disengage again. It forced it to engage once. It bottomed and reversed, forced it to turn up. Even over here during that strong downtrend, my daily reverse forced the weekly to turn up. My daily then top moved back toward oversold, forcing the weekly to engage. It bottomed, reversed back towards overbought territory, forcing it to disengage. And most recently, the last several days and last couple of weeks we're in now, it's been forcing the weekly to start engaging back down. Well, if this continues and it is 1-2 going down in 3, then now guess what we're going to see? Very unlikely we're going to see when the daily turns up, the weekly will disengage. More likely that it will not disengage, it will stay engaging, and my daily will depressurize to slingshot lower and lower as we ultimately break below that 105.19. Well, what if it ends up being this 2 C going down in D? Then yes, the weekly could stay engaged for a while the daily finishes its cycle down, and may even disengage to go back and re-engage as we would go down in D, up in E, then continue with a further push lower. Well, neither one has to happen that way, right? I could have my D go down, my E up, and the weekly just stays engaging while the daily does what? Daily finishes its down cycle, daily goes up cycle, daily goes back down cycle. So it's not a guarantee that if it's one or the other, we're absolutely going to see this disengage. But if we don't see it disengage, that lends well to the euro not bursting higher, meaning going up anywhere near the previous highs or higher without the weekly starting to show some signs of disengaging. So that's why I'm going to keep an eye on the daily once it finally bottoms, and we expect that won't happen probably for a few more days, and this area should likely reach this 109.50, 108.50, and that would be the initial wave move, and then we would expect another move up as the daily reverses, and then another move down via the daily just depressurizing the slingshot lower, or the daily going up, reversing, and heading back down. We still would expect this to be a 3-wave move. And even if it ends up being the big one, breaking below the previous low, it still needs to move in a 3-wave move because of the type of correction we believe is unfolding. Any questions? So Gary, what's the motto? The motto is my daily trend momentum and PAI are down. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to have a simple strategy. As long as my weekly stays engaging, and my daily heads down, the weekly will remain engaging, right? Pretty simple. As long as the daily trend momentum and PAI are down, 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 there's no way this weekly is going to disengage. James, got that? Al? Andres? Ian? Harold Glenn? No way this is going to disengage and turn back up without the daily trend momentum and PAI reversing direction. At least the daily slingshot engaging. And generally, in order to force a weekly to disengage and to move higher, it's not only going to take the daily that maybe slingshot up, but force the trend momentum to cross. So we have both the trend momentum and PAI up. That could potentially force the weekly to disengage. But as I always give you that option, it doesn't mean because the daily trend momentum and PAI are moving higher, this must disengage. But it's because of a daily trend momentum and PAI when it will engage. So that's a point of clarification. Stacy, when my daily bottoms and reverses and moves up, it does not guarantee the weekly must disengage, but it is a daily trend momentum PAI moving up that forces it to disengage. So that's why all eyes, once that daily does reverse and start moving higher in the coming days, we're going to see how this weekly reacts. And if the weekly goes, that's fine, daily, do your thing, but I am not going to turn and hook up. I'm just going to sit here and wait for you to depressurize, and then you're going to slingshot lower in the direction of the weekly moving down. That's why it's going to be very important that not only the weekly stays engaging over the next several days, but that starting next week we get the trend momentum to cross to the downside, and we have a trend momentum and PAI moving down. When we have a trend momentum and PAI moving down, it's much harder for a daily reversal to then force it to move back up or disengage because we have a slingshot engaging and a trend momentum crossing. Fair enough? So yes, it still can force a trend momentum and PAI to eventually turn when the daily turn, but notice what can happen. While we're moving down lower, the daily as it's moving and the weekly's moving down, we could see the daily slingshot lower and lower and lower and lower and lower before that final reversal forces it back and forces the weekly to turn. So just like the 4 hour, my 4 hour keeps moving down and oversold, slingshotting lower and lower and lower and lower, while my daily moved from overbought to oversold. My daily did the exact same behavior, James, Ian, Marty, as my weekly push lower. See it? Over and over and over and over as the what? Weekly kept going from overbought toward oversold. And most recently over here, where that scenario I just pointed out, my weekly was moving from overbought toward oversold, overbought toward oversold. And we had a what? Trend momentum PAI on a weekly, trend momentum PAI on a weekly, moving from overbought toward oversold, overbought toward oversold. Where we see that unfolding, and I'll move my little line over this way to the right of that equation. What did the daily do? The daily went from overbought toward oversold, and once it got down into oversold territory, it was forced to slingshot and slingshot and slingshot and slingshot and slingshot. And notice, using the crosshair, when this first reached oversold territory, the euro was sitting down here at a low of about 109. Everybody see what I'm doing? I'm taking the crosshair to show you where and reference this trend momentum as far as the PAI reached oversold territory. It was here about 109 as the low, and we went on to move another 400 plus pips lower, forcing that daily as it depressurized to slingshot lower and lower and lower and lower. Over 400 pips of lower and lower and lower. Well, guess what? If we do over 400 pips lower and lower and lower, that's after the daily bottomed. And we moved from the swing point high of 113.94, basically moved another 400 plus pips to get down there as my trend momentum started to move. And my PAI went from overbought to oversold. Well, look, we're moving from overbought toward oversold. We're not there yet. We still have probably several more days before we get there. And we know we got a long time before the trend momentum 1 and 2 gets down there. That means we can not only move 300 or 400 more pips to where we get this to oversold territory and start moving, but once we bottom and reverse we could then slingshot lower and lower for another 400 plus pips. And what happens if we do that? Well, we're going to be breaking below the previous low. And that would set the tone for the 2 going down in 3. And basically that's what I'm going to look for. I know we're going lower, and again, I'm not making light of the lack of importance of this wave count. It's very important. Is it 2 going down in 3? Is it C going down in D? But it's not something, if I know nothing about Elliott wave and it even confuses me, then so what? It's not that you need to know this by heart and be an Elliottician. It's simply giving you turn-by-turn instructions and simply following the basic rule. We follow the direction of the daily trend. The trend is your friend. Absolutely is your friend. But it doesn't mean, Andres, we can't scalp when we're going against the trend, because there are nice hardy moves counter trend, right? But ultimately it's a lot easier to sell rallies in a strong downtrend than it is to try to buy dips as they're starting to move back in the corrective phase. Because why? When we start the correction in a downtrend and we're starting to move up, it tends to chop up and down, moving sideways and grinding its way higher, but it's up, down, up, down, up, down. Where in the downtrend, it's more fluid towards a stronger down move. And yes, even in a strong down move, we do get little retracements along the way, but they don't last very long and they're short-lived. And it's simply the lower time frame depressurizing to slingshot lower, or they cycle back towards overbought, giving us a new workforce sell cycle. So in closing, I'm expecting the pound and the euro to continue to grind lower because my daily trend momentums and PAIs are down. And eventually we're going to get the daily to change, but until then, Al, simple strategy. That's what's cool about this software. Make it simple. We're going to continue to sell 4-hour slingshot, sell H4 slingshot, sell 4-hour slingshot over and over and over and over. So as we go to the 4-hour, that's exactly what we're seeing. Not the most biggest, robust ones along the way. They turned and turned and turned and turned until most recently here we got a nice, beautiful one that moved about 200 pips on it. A lovely move down. And then this most recent was about 60 pips. But it's still consistently making lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. And that is a definition of a downtrend. So I would not be so gung-ho to buy these dips as I am to continue to sell the rallies, because that's what the daily is speaking to us. And as the daily again is moving from overbought toward oversold, that is what the weekly is showing as well. It was strong enough and concerted effort enough to what? Ultimately push the weekly back down. And that's an important development. So Stacy, your trade alert is to continue to sell 4-hour slingshots over and over and over. In the interim, we're going to continue to grind sideways to lower until we get that 4-hour depressurization. Remember I said at the top of class we could peel off some profits, and I would not be surprised to see a little more sideways movement, perhaps a little lower, because my 1 hour is trying to depressurize, but my 15 and 30 are starting to show signs of potentially engaging down. So if I had to guess what the euro is going to do, it's doing what it's supposed to. It's going to move sideways to lower initially. Once the 15 and the 30 slingshots theoretically should not make lower lows because the 1 hour is starting to turn up, but it doesn't mean it's impossible for it to do that. So I'm going to look for this to basically chop up and down sideways direction. Yeah, a little bit lower because my 15 and 30 potential slingshots, but they're running on low fuel, because as my 15 and 30 slingshots are going down, I have a 1 hour PAI starting to turn up, and I have a 4-hour trend momentum in PAI and oversold territory. So it's not a guarantee we won't make a lower low, but that's why I do expect this to go a little bit lower first. But I would be cautious about how far down I'm expecting it to go. And we're going to ultimately start grinding sideways to higher as my 15, my 30, my 1 hour, my 4 hour all start to depressurize. And that's exactly what I want to happen. Hey, Euro, do that exact thing, because in order for you to do that, that's when you were setting up the next 4-hour slingshot. So in closing, look for this to turn and hook out. Yeah, we might even make a little bit lower low, but it should not be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pips lower. But I'm looking for what? I'm looking for the depressurization, 15:30 1-hour move from oversold back towards overbought, allowing the 4-hour to depressurize. And if my 4-hour continues to depressurize, the daily says no, we sell a 4-hour slingshot. 4-hour depressurized, daily says no, we sell a 4-hour slingshot. 4-hour depressurized, daily says no, we sell a 4-hour slingshot. 4-hour depressurizes, daily says no, we sell a 4-hour slingshot. And notice the 30 starting to engage. So yes, I do expect to see that this is going to push this a little lower. It's moving a few more pips, but it may not go shattering below the previous low. And again, why, if I'm selling these, I'm taking it's basically a scalp too, even though James, it's in the direction of the right trend, but it's still a scalp now if I'm just starting a new position to the downside, because I have a 1-hour PAI starting to turn up, and more importantly, I have a 4-hour trend momentum and PAI in oversold territory. That limits how far this can move without another depressurization. Fair enough? So in closing, look for this to perhaps go a little bit lower, start to chop up and down, move sideways to higher, and ultimately that's exactly what we prefer to see, because that's how the 4-hour will depressurize in order for us to sell the 4-hour slingshot. And as always, while the 4-hour starts to depressurize, keep an eye on the daily. Does it turn and hook? Does it flatten out a little bit? But if it doesn't, full-blown red hook, blue flattening hooks, green flattens and hooks, and we're full-blown engaged, then I'm going to expect the 4-hour will slingshot lower and lower yet again. Okay? And look for this to grind towards what? 109.50, 108.50 area as my daily continues to move from overbought down and towards oversold. And one last time, if you joined us late, the weekly is engaging over as we expected it would. We said that if the daily was able to turn and move over and start to move from overbought toward oversold, that would be enough to force this weekly slingshot to re-engage. And that's exactly what we see. That is exactly what we see, because the daily was able to not only on the PAI start to turn down, but persisted day after day after day after day, forced the trend momentums to cross. And since then, for several days, they both have moved from overbought toward oversold, overbought toward oversold. And again, the PAI has further to go. We're just getting about the halfway point with the trend momentum, one reaching about halfway point. So the PAI and the trend momentum still tell us we have much further to go to the downside in the coming days. And at which, as long as this stays down, down and down, we have simple procedure. Sell 4-hour slingshots. And in the interim, we're going to see this start to dry up, move sideways to higher, and a chopping, overlapping sideways to higher move. Ultimately, as it's done over and over and over, you get a little bit of rally, you slingshot lower. Get a little bit of a rally, you slingshot lower. Get a little bit of a rally, you slingshot lower. And that's what we'd expect the 4-hour to continue to exhibit signs and symptoms for as long as the daily trend momentum and PAI are down. And if the daily trend momentum and PAI continue down for several more days, then no questions asked, the weekly will continue to engage and stay down as well. And Stacy, that's where next week comes in to be very important. As we move Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday scenario, is it enough to not only keep the trend momentum engaging and the PAI engaging, but is it enough to force this trend momentum on the weekly to cross? That's really going to set the tone for further downside in the coming weeks if my weekly trend momentum and PAI are down, just like it did over here. Once we had a weekly trend momentum and PAI down, it moved, again, a total of 114.94 over here on the far left side, all the way down to 105. It moved just under 1,000 pips. right? Just under 1,000 pips as my weekly reversed. Well, imagine if we continue week after week after week after week after week after week after week, and the trend momentum does cross week after week after week after week after week after week after week, then yes, we could move 1,000 plus pips again. Well, where does that put us? That puts us down below parity. Amen? How cool is that? Well, that would set the tone for our 2 going down in 3. Because 2 going down in 3 sets the tone where, yeah, we should go blowing past 105.19 and head down to 104.61 and make a move towards parity and below as we stair-step our way down and finish this ultimate complex. Fair enough? So again, look for more sideways to lower initially, but again, we're going to need some chopping, overlapping sideways to upwards movement as my workforce reorganizes. And that's exactly what we want to see. We want it to move from oversold to overbought, but not only the 15 and try to slingshot lower, the 30 slingshot lower, perhaps the 1 hour slingshot lower, but eventually they move all the way from oversold all the way to overbought, not only the 15 to 30 and the 1 hour, but that would be enough to force the 4 hour to depressurize into potentially another slingshot. So in closing, one last time, we're expecting, as long as my weekly is engaging down, this should stay engaging for several more days until the daily trend momentum in PAI turns. And once the daily trend momentum in PAI turns, does not mean this will disengage. So what happens if the daily bottoms reverses and the weekly says no? Then in the coming days, we're going to look to sell daily slingshots. So for now, we're going to sell 4 hour slingshots over and over and over. And if the daily bottoms and reverses, then my weekly says no, we're going to look to sell daily slingshots in the future. As we did here when the weekly turned over, my daily did exactly what the 4 hour's been doing, right, James? Slingshotting lower and lower and lower while the weekly moved from overbought toward oversold. And remember when we talked about this, I kept referring to, hey, the 4 hour, once it tops and rolls and starts this over again, we're going to see the 4 hour exhibit this behavior like the daily exhibited when the weekly was going down. The 4 hour should exhibit when the daily's going down. Right? So not only did the daily do this over here when the weekly was moving, but notice since the daily started to top and roll, the 4 hours went from overbought toward oversold, and it too started to slingshot lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. This is expected, anticipated, not predicted, but anticipated behavior in advance. So Al, I look for further, more of the same. More of these 4 hour slingshots over and over and over. And yes, we could see a little more of this sideways to lower action until what? We get this workforce to move from oversold all the way to overbought, including the 1 hour to finish oversold towards overbought, allowing the 4 hour to depressurize. And I'm going to be salivating to sell the next 4 hour slingshot, especially as we depressurize and start moving up, whether or not the trend momentum crosses, or it simply just depressurizes on the PAI to slingshot, or I get both. I get a deeper depressurization to the point where it does slingshot, but my trend momentum is up on the 4 hour. Great. Because as long as that happens and my daily says, not happening, people, we're going down, then we salivate to sell the next 4 hour slingshot. Okay? Pound dollar. Very similar behavior. The pound has been moving lower and lower and lower. The question is this now going to be another reversal up, or are we going to continue to do my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and subdivide, working our way down? Remember what we said, that if this 4 was done, we should expect price to stair step, giving me lower highs and lower lows. So far, so good. And we would expect it to take out the previous low. That's a given so far. We have done that. Next up is the first target of 40.36. 40.36. We should be able to pull and suck price down towards that 40.36. We came close yesterday as we went to a low of 40.55. And we're working on another new low today. We're about 6-7 pips away from that 40.55 and likely will make a run at this 40.36. That's target 1. Well, eventually we're going to stair step our way down to 36.44. Yeah, another 400 pips between these two, but that's the projected path. The question still could be, Al, what if this is for, Gary, it appears to be done because we're breaking new low, but remember, expanded flat allows the B wave to make a new low, limited so it can't go on forever and ever and ever and come way down here, down and below 136 here and say, oh, that's still my A coming down in B. It can't go quite so far, but it can make a lower low before reversing back up. So I'm not warning you, hey, the pound's going to go way back up here and make another run back towards this 48 range and go back above 45.70 and work our way back up toward the previous high of 46.65 and likely to make a higher high, but it's still possible. Well, that's great, Gary. You see that we could go back up here, or we could easily keep going lower and lower. What are we going to do? We're simply going to follow the line of progression. My 4 hour should consistently move lower and lower and lower while the daily continues to move from overbought toward oversold. And even the daily gave us a little blip here. It kind of turned where the red tried to hook up. We had a couple of days of upside pressure. And red, blue, they kind of flattened and looked like, ooh, is this my slingshot down going into a slingshot up? It lasted a couple of days, but it ultimately failed and turned over, headed lower. Remember what we said about this? That the red can hook, blue can hook, etc. If green money flow doesn't turn and hook, or even if it does, we look toward the weekly and say, we need help on this. And my weekly has started engaging like the euro. So this is a very bearish sign that we're not only going to continue to go lower, but no way are we expecting this to go way back up here. What would it require to do so? It's going to require the weekly to turn back up, trend momentum and PAI back up. Well, no way my weekly is going to turn and hook out and start going back up until the daily turns. And if the daily tries to turn again and the weekly goes, nope, not going to happen, people, then we sell the next daily slingshot. And if it does it again, the weekly says no, we sell the next daily slingshot. So we could easily see, based on that weekly engaging down now, my daily could bottom slingshot lower a few times as we not only reach target 1 at 40.36, but we go on to reach target 2. Well, is it possible this could be the A and the B? Yes, because we did make a slight lower low. That's fine. But we need what? The daily to turn and go up. And as my daily trend momentum and PAI start to move toward overbought, we need the weekly to turn and hook out and the weekly continue higher. So the beauty of this, Marty, is how do we know which one is going to play out? We look for those signs and symptoms. And until the daily trend momentum and PAI turn up, we're going to look to sell 4 hour slingshots over and over and over. And that's what it's been showing so far. And once the daily does start to turn up, that means, Stacy, just like the euro, the pound should be similar. Once my daily starts to turn and hook up, and we have a trend momentum and a PAI up, we then will look towards the weekly to say, hey, is this going to affect you to disengage, or are you going to ignore it? Don't be fooled by these little slingshots, meaning, oh, it's not going to have a whole lot of follow through. Check out what happened previously on these little slingshots. It kept the pound going hundreds and hundreds of pips lower. These little almost insipid. This looks like this over here, right on that daily. The daily was going from down to up and it flipped right back over. Well, the weekly can do the same, where we get a little bitty, appears a little, basically almost non-existent separation, and the trend momentum didn't even cross to the upside, but it flips right back over, goes down hundreds of pips. Then it depressurized the slingshot, hundreds of pips. Depressurized the slingshot, hundreds of pips. Depressurized slingshot, hundreds of pips, and hundreds of pips. And we moved, and this is part of a thousands of pip move down from this lofty 170 range all the way down to our previous lows over here at 145. Over 4,500 pips was this initial down surge. And we moved up a few thousand pips here, going from that 140 all the way to our 160s. So a couple of thousand pips. And then now it's tearing back down, breaking new lows and heading down thousands of pips again. So again, I'm not going to say, Stacy, just because we got a little small weekly slingshot, it's not going to be a strong undercurrent to pull price down hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pips. Yes, I expect 40.36 to come into play, and yes, I expect 136.44 range to come into play, and much, much lower. The prognosis for the pound and the euro long term, remember long term, that doesn't mean we can't have a few weeks or even a month of a correction continue and a bigger, larger, more time-consuming correction, but we're talking months and months and months, tallying a year, if not into a few years. We're talking about massive moves down, not only to these first two targets, but for price to continue to make a run towards 135, break below that, and the pound could start making new lows. And I highly expect over the next few years, that's exactly what we will see. Fair enough? But it doesn't matter that we anticipate this is what's going to happen years down the road, Marty. We continue to take it one day at a time, one trade at a time, one cycle at a time, and we follow the line of progression, lowering and going in the direction of the daily. Okay? So if my daily, even though it's oversold, warning, warning, Will Rogers, warning, warning, we have a daily that is oversold as we're moving towards this support trough. Not only is it the previous swing point low that we're taking out, but we got our target zone right below that, and a target zone is what, Gary? A battle zone. So it's going to struggle as it came close. It popped up. It's trying again. It might pop up again and could even come all the way up here before we then come down and ultimately break down and reach these two targets. But again, it's based on the cycling time frame, signs and symptoms, and no way the pound is going up here without what? The daily trend momentum and PAI moving up, and as the daily trend momentum and PAI move up, the weekly disengages, because the daily by itself depressurizing against a weekly engaging down is probably not enough to rally all of these hundreds and hundreds of pips to go back from 140 back above 46.65 over 600 plus pips. Everybody with me? So Al, that's why, yes, I give you the visual of what appears to be wave counts, but we follow a simple rule that never changes. That's the consistency. The common denominator, the consistency, is going to be the cycling time frames equals trading opportunities. As they cycle, they're supposed to and anticipate very specific signs and symptoms as they're expected to exhibit within certain cycles. Meaning when my daily is down and my weekly are down, the 4 hour should slingshot lower and lower and back down. Why? My monthly is still down, right? Yeah, it was depressurizing in here, good. Then it started to engage, and notice it stayed engaging. Not only did it stay engaging, Stacy, but my trend momentum that was up turned back down. It started to engage, and month after 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 month, force a trend momentum that was up to flip back over. So on a monthly perspective, I have trend momentum and PAI down. That does not bode well for the pound making any massive surges upside. And while my weekly is depressurizing, slingshotting lower, that's a sign and symptom the monthly is still pushing lower. Perfect. So next up would be, well, once the daily does finally finish its cycle, it should start to move up. But ow, it's still pointing down. It's not turning up. Trend momentum PAI, angle and separation. Trend momentum 1 and 2, angle and separation. PAI is back down. So we're stuck with the same logic. Hey, I have a trend momentum and PAI down on a daily. So what does that mean my strategy should be? I should continue to sell 4 hour slingshots. Sell 4 hour slingshots. Sell 4 hour slingshots. And even in the midst of these 4 hour slingshots, it makes literally, in some cases, hundreds of pips. Other cases, 50, 60, 70, 80 pips. on a simple little small slingshot. So let's go ahead and put our little label in here. And as long as that daily trend momentum and PAI are down, what are we going to do? I'll put this one in magenta again. I like that. Across the board are for the euro and the pound continue to sell 4-hour slingshots out today, tomorrow, next week, next month. As long as my daily is pointing down, trend momentum PAI, that's all I should be thinking about, selling 4-hour slingshots. Well, once my daily starts to turn back up, and it happens to be going against a weekly moving down, then of course, if my weekly continues to move from overbought to oversold, or engages and moves from overbought to oversold, or flips back down and stays engaging where we still are down and down, like over here, we got a little bit of a blip and then it turned right back down, blip, turn back down. While that's still unfolding, I can sell daily slingshot lower, daily slingshot lower. But for now, my daily's still down, so I'm going to be selling 4-hour slingshots. Fair enough? And yes, I'm expecting the pound to do similar behavior, start to chop up and down, move sideways to higher, because what's happened? My daily is moving towards oversold territory, but why should we be peeling off some profits? Because my 4-hour returned back to oversold territory. My 1 hour is in oversold territory, moving back towards the scene of the crime. My 30, having slingshotted over and over, is moving back towards the scene of the crime, meaning oversold territory. And the 15 is moving back toward oversold and starting to depressurize. So that means we should start to see sideways chopping up and down, sideways to higher depressurization, while my 15, 30, 1 hour start to depressurize. And ultimately, it helps the 4-hour start to depressurize. And as long as that daily says, okay, great, do what you got to do, but my trend momentum and PAI are still going to go down, then I'm going to sell 4-hour slingshots. Stacy, you got the rhythm? The rhythm? The rhythm's going to move you? Who's that? Gloria Estefan. You got the rhythm. The rhythm's going to move you. Well, this rhythm should continue over and over and over and over and over while the daily trend momentum and PAI are down. The daily should exhibit slingshot lower, 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 while the weekly continues down. Well, I don't need to worry whether the weekly is going to continue down until perhaps the daily starts to turn. If the daily's moving down, the weekly will stay down. Once the daily turns, then yes, we'll go back to the weekly and say, okay, weekly, how do you feel about the daily depressurizing? Are you going to disengage and start moving up? So we end up having a daily trend momentum and a PAI up, a weekly trend momentum and a PAI back up. Then yes, this could be part of the next big correction. And yes, it might even be this 4 not being complete here, still unfolding, and that be my A, my B, and we grind back up 600 pips back towards this upper quadrant. Well, is that going to confuse you, John Young husband? Of course not. If my weekly doesn't disengage as my daily depressurized, the weekly says no, then no way we're going up here. And if my daily starts to depressurize and move up, yeah, we could see a little up move, a little grinding sideways, chop, chop, chop sideways to higher, but we're not going to expect anything like a 600 plus pip move back up here. So the only way this is an A, a B going up in C is if my daily trend momentum and PAI can go from oversold towards overbought, and the weekly disengages and I have a daily trend momentum PAI up, my weekly disengages and ends up having a weekly trend momentum PAI up, then yeah, we can go back up here. So that's why this labeling sits over here. Even if we're way down here, that labeling will sit here until we obvious that we break too far that we can no longer have an A and a B going up in a C. That 4 is done and we're subdividing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scenario. And even if this is 4 done moving down, we still expect further downside to come. And this is not the end of it here. This is part of target 1 and 2, but I still think we have further to go to the downside before we have a wave 3 going up in 4 and another subdividing 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5 scenario. So any question? If you're short, take profits. We're expecting to see chop, 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 sideways to upwards correction. And Andres, this could last for several hours, 12 to 24 hours, as my 4-hour depressurizes again. It could turn into something, not only does it take 12 to 24 hours, but we don't keep slingshotting lower. We start to grind this way. But what's it going to take? Daily turning up. Trend momentum PAI up. Uh-oh. Maybe this is going to get some legs in its retracement. And if my daily starts to move from oversold to overbought, then a weekly disengages, then yeah, the likelihood is that strongly we're going to go back up to 146.65 range and likely to go above. So any questions so far? Yes, this could be an A, a B, and going up in a C. But if my daily stays down, my weekly stays down, my daily depressurizes and slingshots lower and lower, then it makes the likelihood of this being complete higher and higher and higher probability. So bottom line, keep it simple. As long as, and again, similar to what I just said on the euro, as long as my weekly is engaging down, we're at no risk of it disengaging until when? Everybody should know the answer right off the bat. You don't even have to think about it. When is a weekly slingshot likely to start engaging? When my daily trend momentum and PAI turn and start heading down. Well, when is a weekly slingshot likely to disengage? When the daily trend momentum and PAI start heading up. Right? So Al, no way, shape, or form is that weekly slingshot, as it's bolded engaging, is going to show signs of disengaging until my daily turns and reverses. But just because, Stacy, one more time, the daily does start to turn up does not mean it's going to disengage. But I will say if my daily trend momentum PI turn and go up and moves from oversold towards overbought, then yes, I'm going to expect this will disengage. But just because it initially starts to move and starts to turn and move up does not mean the weekly is going to disengage then. It would take the trend momentum and the PAI moving up, and doing it for day after day after day, basically moving from oversold towards overbought to force that weekly to disengage. So for now, we're going to sell 4-hour slingshots over and over. On the euro and the pound, we're going to look for some chopping, overlapping sideways to upwards correction over the next 12 to 24 hours. At which point of that depressurization, keep an eye on the daily. If the daily trend momentums and respective PAI stay down, then absolutely continue to sell the 4-hour slingshots. Well, what if the 4-hour starts to depressurize and the daily starts to turn? Then that's going to give it a little more legs in its depressurization and the time it's going to take to depressurize. But if the daily does start to turn, then your eyes will focus on the weekly. And again, no way, shape, or form is this weekly going to disengage and start to go higher without the daily trend momentum and PAI. Everybody good? You know what we're looking for. Signs and symptoms. So if those signs and symptoms, Al, lead us right back to where we are, we'll continue to sell. I sold the pound yesterday, made 100, 200 pips, whatever it was. It was a nice hearty move down. It's still grinding lower after last night. And again, it's working its way. Is it going to break a new low and head lower? It's more than likely got a good chance to do it, as it bottomed at 455 and we bottomed over here at 40.78, and this one we bottomed at 40.55. We did make a lower low on this weekly candle, but right here on the daily we had a previous low and it's very close. So we're going to end up making a lower low from this, or is this going to end up with a higher low? Keep eyes on this, because I do expect some chopping, overlapping sideways to upwards movement as the workforce 15, 30, 1 hour start to depressurize. Yes, we should see some chopping, overlapping sideways to upwards. But notice why I always talk about why is it chopping, overlapping sideways to upwards correction? Because as we depressurize, what should happen? Well, my 5-minute short to do it first, and it's likely to start engaging back down, which if my 15 and 30 are starting to turn up, the 5-minute slingshot will fail, disengage, and grind higher, but price will do what? go up, go down, go up, go down, go up, go down, go up, go down, in a chopping fashion. Then as my 15 depressurized, it could turn into a slingshot lower. As my 30 and 1 hour start to depressurize and move up, and then it can slingshot down, fail, so I get lows, highs, higher lows, higher high, chop, 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 chop. As it disengages and continues with the 30, later the 30 could try to do it. If my 1 hour's headed up and the 4 hour's starting to turn up at that point, then it's likely the 30-minute slingshot will fail. It's likely the 1 hour slingshot will eventually fail as my 4 hour starts to depressurize. Okay? But that's where this chopping, overlapping, sideways direction comes into play. S&P. The S&P. To no one's surprise, Andres, we said last week. Just 1 second. As we said last week, that we would expect a couple of downside days because the daily started to turn over. But I didn't think that that move up was the end of the road. It would move up in an A, a B, and a C. So far, so good. And the question is this little latest rally yesterday enough to call that A, B, and C complete? Or is it going to grind and go a little further? That's where my line of progression comes in. Yes, I expect, even though this robust move, the S&P's grinded nicely, higher and higher. It ultimately took out what? 1939, 1939.50, right? Ultimately took that out, and we did go to a high so far of 1943. What did we say? Well, that was the one we had where it was a 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 and another 1 2, but this 2 could not go in the area of the previous 1 2, and we did break a new high. So that's no longer that 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 orange. That's off the table. Well, this is possibly our 1 2 1 2 1 2 and another 1 2 3 4 5 giving us a 1 and a 2. So that's still valid. Everybody see it? We got a 1 2 black. We got a 1 2 blue. We got a 1 magenta, 2 magenta, 3 magenta, 4 magenta, 5 magenta. Breaking down to make a 3 black. And we're in a 4 black up. Or we have this over here where we go this other route, 1 2 black, 1 2 blue, and we have the green, 1 2 3 4 5 green, giving us this end of the move, giving us a 1 magenta, and we're working on a wave 2 magenta to the upside. Well, remember what we said, Andres? It doesn't matter if it was a black 4 going high or a 2 magenta or a 3 orange or a 2 orange back then or this 4 blue. What does all that mean? They all said we were going higher. Well, more than just what the wave counts potentially said was going higher. What did the software tell us? We were going higher. My monthly is still down, so nothing about this means we're going breaking new highs. My weekly is starting to turn back up. That's good. Because in order for that monthly to continue down, the weekly depressurizing, we know in the coming weeks, perhaps days to weeks, we're going to see the weekly slingshot lower. If my weekly depressurizing up does not force the monthly to turn, change angle, flatten, hook back up, and turn back up, then this is simply a small rally in the overall downtrend. And we would expect this to end and resume the downtrend as we more than likely going to make a run toward the bottom of the cloud, the top of the cloud over here. So Al, right now we got a trend momentum PAI 1 and 2. Trend momentum 1 and 2 headed down on a monthly, and a PAI red, blue, green, and not only down but a pretty steep slope. And right now the weekly is starting to depressurize. It did turn over and engage back down. We did make a lower low. Now it's depressurizing again. So far my PAI is up, but my trend momentum starting to flatten. Is this going to turn into a lot more upside? Or is this going to turn into fizzle manizzle and start to work its way back down? Well, this could easily turn back down as it's done before, right? Turned up, turned back down, went from a new swing point to a new swing point low. Not by a whole lot, but it still was successful making a lower low. No reason to believe it won't do it again. So what's it going to cause behind it? The daily changing directions. So Andres, this up move could maybe even grind out, inch out, a laboring rise. Could be a little bit more left, but the key is, when do we expect this correction to be over? When the daily changes direction. Like the last time we had a correction, little three-wave correction, and then we slingshotted not only down on the daily, but the weekly slingshotted down on that small one and made a lower low. We would expect this rally to the upside yet again to end when the daily switches directions. Stacy? When the daily switches direction. So we're still interested in selling a daily slingshot. But look at green money flow. Red started to hook, blue started to flatten. Money flow's saying no. That would warrant, as we started to see that little bit of a push here, that would warrant it start to turn back out and move up in the direction of the trend momentum and money flow. And what exactly happened? We told you last week we expected at least a couple of days or so of downside pressure while the foreman and workforce moved from overbought to oversold. Look for a downside day. Sure enough, that's where this labeling came into play, that we said this is likely to be end of A, and we're going to look for some chopping, overlapping sideways to lower and a little ABC move for our B wave to end. At which point we're going to look for what? The 4-hour foreman and workforce to cycle back up and the daily continue back up. And that's what we see so far. All right. So I can't tell you that just because we're seeing a little bit of a down move here, that's the end of this. What are we going to call this? 4 black done in 5, or 2 magenta down in 3, or 4 down in 5? Depends on how it's subdividing. Which one is it going to be? We're not going to call this over until the daily flips. Just like when we saw this, I said that wasn't the end of the daily because it's still moving higher. We expected further upside, and we've gotten that. So structure-wise, we could be over, but it's going to take the foreman and workforce moving from overbought to oversold, and the daily turning over, starting to move from overbought to oversold. That's how we're going to break back down. Any questions? So again, we can't call this over, Andres. Blessing. I can't call that over until the daily finish its cycle. But what can happen very quickly? The 4-hour can move from overbought to oversold. Red and blue can hook. Green could flatten. We could start engaging, and we could end up with one of these. Trend momentum after a few days crosses over, and we end up going from overbought toward overbought toward oversold, and it stays engaging day after day after day after day after day after day after day. The trend momentum crosses, moving from overbought toward oversold. And lo and behold, this was just another little rally and a little ABC done, and we're moving down and we're over. Okay? Well, this is part of subdividing wave counts. We have our own little robust move A, down in B, up in C. The question is that over, or it's going to go further? We need the daily to turn. So nothing has changed. While my 4 hours depressurizing and moving lower, this is a good sign the daily's getting ready, because what did the 4-hour do? Before, the 4-hour would engage and make a higher high, and maybe we can engage and make another higher high if the daily doesn't. So far, we saw it engage, slingshot, disengage to re-engage. It's disengaged to re-engage. It's done that twice in this little rally. Went down, disengage, disengage, re-engage to break new highs. Engage, disengage, re-engage to break new highs. Maybe it's repeating the performance 1, 2, 3 times. Engage, disengage, re-engage. And the likelihood we're going to break another new high is good, as long as what? this stays up. So James, I'm not concerned. I see the 4-hour engage, disengage. If this stays pointing up, then it's going to re-engage and make a higher high. It's done it once, twice, maybe it'll do it a third time. So that's why, again, I'm not going to say just because we got this high here at 1943, and yes, we're sitting at 27, and yes, my 4-hour engaged up failed and is disengaging, that's the end of the road. If my daily starts to turn down, then yes, it's over. If the daily says no, then we still have another scalping opportunity to buy the 4-hour next time it engages up. So one more time, S&P. Very likely, very unlikely to go several more points to go break 1998. It can break that. Price must stay below on certain of these wave counts. But if this is my 1 going up in 2, then I can go all the way up here to 2074. And that's part of this 3 going up in 4 scenario. Well, what if it is this from the swing point high up here, we got 2 working our way down, then obviously if it's my 3-4 here, it can't go above 1998. If it's this 3 black in the same area, just a different wave count, it can't go above 1998. Which one can? If it's the 1, 2, we could go above that. So I won't say I guarantee that's the end of the road now. If my daily turns, then yes, we'll sell the rallies in a downtrend, expecting price to not only head back to that 18 range, but to start to work its way down to 1730, 1647. There is a small, absolute minuscule, it's almost non-existent. You need an electron microscope to find the possibility, but that this 4 could be done, and we're working on 5 up, and the bullish market has returned. But it's extremely unlikely. And as we know, Al and others, in order for this to even be attempted and even to take it seriously, I need to see price break 1998. I need to see price break 2074. I need to see it break 2104. And I need to then go on to break 2133 before I really take this thing seriously. So it's got to rally substantially higher, over 200 points, before I'll even take it seriously. But I just want to have that out there. Well, what if, William Bruce, that is the case? Then we're going to need some news from the Fed saying, nope, we're not going to raise interest rates anytime soon. Economic conditions are not favorable for any future rate hikes, and we'll keep those off the table indefinitely. Then you're likely to see this baby continue higher. But I doubt they're going to say that for now. Anyway, back to the question at hand. When is this over? Whether it's 4 going down in 5, 4 blue going down in 5 blue, or 2 magenta going down in 3 magenta. What? What is it? How is it? Which one is it? Don't care, because Al, we know we're going to expect this upwards movement to continue until the daily reverses. And yes, this latest swing point could have the daily eventually reverse. But until then, if the daily doesn't reverse as my 4-hour depressurizes, then I'm going to buy the 4-hour slingshot. Quick scalp. Everybody clear? If this daily, red and blue both start to turn and hook and force the, remember, since they're holding hands, not only do I need the red to hook, I need the red and blue to hook. And if the red and blue hook together, and whether they're holding hands or hook and hook, once they start to both head down, trend momentum's flat to down, PAI is flat to down. Excuse me, not the trend momentum. My red hooks, my blue hooks, and my trend momentum's flat to down, then yes, I would call it the end of this move. But if my 4-hour depressurizes, Al, and this stays up, especially the what? Money flow. If money, even if the red and the blue start to hook and money flow says no, like it tried to over here, our 2 down days there, when the 4-hour made its cycle, that was flattening and trying to hook, but money flow said no. If that happens again, you're going to expect what? You're going to expect this will turn and go right back up. And look what it's done. My red turned and hooked, blue flat and slightly hooked. Not really a hook, but started angling downward. Money flow the whole time said, get out of my face. Not going to happen. And what did price do? Went on to make a new higher high. And what did these do? They started to turn back up. So again, if I see this, Andres, Stacy, John Young husband, Marty, I see the red and blue start to hook clearly. Hey, it's hooking, but this doesn't flatten the turn and stays up, then I'm going to buy the next 4-hour slingshot for another scalp. And how high can we go? We're already touching the cloud. We could grind through it, maybe come over here to the right, lasting another couple of days, and that correction, and we go up towards this 1950 range. It's possible we could get that high. But again, we could also see the 4-hour move from overbought to oversold instead of just simply depressurizing the slingshot, but really start to move from overbought all the way to oversold. Trend momentum not only slightly go down, but go all the way. Then yes, if I see the Foreman and Workforce, and it's specifically the 4-hour, trend momentum and PAI go all the way to oversold out, all the way to oversold, then it's likely to force this daily to turn. So in closing, the S&P may or may not be finished to the upside. As long as the daily trend momentum and PAI are up, we'll continue to buy and scalp 4-hour slingshots higher. Eventually, once, and I expect it to happen relatively soon, maybe another few days at most, but we're going to look for this to start turning over, and when I get the daily trend momentum and the PAI back down, then we're going to call it quits on the correction and a resumption of the downtrend. So Al, Andres, Bill W., Harold Glenn, Bob H., everybody got that down pat? That this may or may not be the end at 43. We could go higher, and if my daily doesn't turn, specifically money flow on the daily PAI does not flatten and turn, it stays up, regardless if the red and the blue hook, money flow stays up, then we're going to expect to buy the next 4-hour scalping slingshot. It will be a scalp, but we could grind and grunt our way higher still. And yes, I have a price must stay below 1998, but that only represents the 3-4 black or the 3-4 blue, and we're able to go above that 1998 even if it's a 1-2 magenta. That would allow for further upside. But again, once that daily does turn, whether it's today, tomorrow, the next day, early next week, whenever it turns, we're going to call it quits. Meaning this correction is over, a resumption of the downtrend is back on, and we're going to start targeting the previous levels of not only this 1898, because that represents the previous swing point bounce, but once we break below that, that will be the first sign and symptom this correction is over. And as we stair step down and break below obviously the previous low, that's the final confirmation it's over. And we're going to start targeting 1730/1647. All right, so say that again, Gary. Let me hear it again. At what point are we going to call 4 black over going down in 5, or 2 magenta down in 3, or 4 down in 5, regardless of which one of this is? When are we going to call this up move correction over? When the daily trend momentum and PAI turn. Up and until then, I want to not only see the 4-hour turn and force the daily to turn, but I want to see price, as the daily starts turning, price break below this 1898, which is my AB swing point low for B here. And as we break below that and continue to stay daily move from overbought to oversold, overbought to oversold, overbought to oversold, and we move down and break out a new low, I'm going to expect the daily moving from overbought to oversold will force that weekly to turn back down and push it lower. And ultimately, we're going to head down to not only this low of 18, but we're going to start targeting 1730/1647. And this still could be the beginning of join you, honey, as we move down and wave 3 magenta of 3 blue, right? 3 blue, Here's 1, 2 magenta, 3 magenta, of 1, 2, 3 blue, of 1, 2, 3 black. And once we go through 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, then we're going to come to a big 1 and start all over with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and subdivide multiple times as we stair step all the way down to 665 and below. But most importantly, as we start to stair step down, we want to see it take out this 1354. That's how we're going to set the tone between, is this Elizabeth, I'm coming to join you, honey, or is this wave 4 giving us a deeper correction before then resuming the uptrend? Okay, so I will go down and say I don't see this as being the end here. I said it when we got that big flash crash over here. I said that wasn't the end. When we had this one, that wasn't the end as far as this is not one here, this one here. When we topped and reversed, we thought we had the beginning of a downtrend. I thought that this was no way, shape, or form the end of this move and going higher. We rallied strongly to a lower high, and we've rallied since then to a lower low. So yet again, Al, James, this is not John Young husband. This is not the end of the road going up in 5. Even though there is an electron microscope out there that could find the rationale behind it being the end of 4, here it's extremely unlikely, and I don't see that as happening. And I've already painted the picture for you. If it is, what if this is the end of the road and it's part of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and my wave 4 is done, and we're moving higher now in 5, breaking new highs and back to the bullish markets? Then it's going to require not only the daily slingshot higher and higher and higher, the weekly continue to move from oversold towards overbought, but it's going to require the monthly to turn and go back, trend momentum PAI back up. Fair enough? So it's going to take the daily, the weekly, and the daily and weekly moving from oversold to overbought, forcing the monthly to join forces. And price must rally all the way back up above 2133 before we go, aha! That wave 4 is done. So it's extremely unlikely. So in the interim, we know what the painted picture should look like in order to be that. For now, we're going to look to buy the dips in this little corrective uptrend because yes, the weekly's turned up. Yes, my daily trend momentum and PAI are still up. And even though we get a little sideways to overlapping action motion, we're going to look to continue to buy 4-hour slingshots. Okay? And likely to make another higher high. And one more time, once the daily trend momentum and PAI flip, and I have my trend momentum and PAI down, daily trend momentum PAI, let me say that again, daily PAI trend momentum, daily trend momentum, daily PAI down, that's when we're going to call this correction over. Up and until then, could we go higher? Yeah, and a potential target is this 1954 area. It's not only a battle zone from previous history, it represents the top of the cloud on our Ichimoku daily chart. So look for a little more chopping up and down sideways to perhaps a little lower as the 4-hour depressurizes. My workforce moves from overbought to oversold. 4-hour depressurizes further. But if this doesn't influence the daily, not only the red and the blue to hook, but green money flow to flatten and turn, then we're going to look to buy the 4-hour slingshot, scalp, hint, 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 scalping trade up, not stay in and hold scenario, a scalping trade. And then once my daily does finally turn, trend momentum PAI, we'll call this quits and resumption of the downtrend, meaning we're going to stair step all the way back down to the previous lows, break out that 18 range, and head towards 1730, 1647. And again, that could be, Elizabeth, I'm coming to join you, honey. And it's not the optimistic 3 black, 4 black going down and 5 black to end wave 4 in this area. It could still be the fact that it's the Elizabeth, I'm coming to join you, honey. But again, the difference in the two is not only structurally that we need to go below 1354 to confirm it's the big one versus wave 4, But also you'll see in the markets, credit bubble crash, you'll have some market crashes along the way in order to drive price down to 665 and below. So does anyone have any questions on the S&P, the euro, and the pound that we so explicitly covered, painting the Picasso? We've talked about the cycling time frames, exactly what your trade alert should be, that if this daily doesn't flatten and turn on the money flow here, then look to scalp a 4-hour slingshot higher in the coming hours. And yes, we could rally maybe towards 1954. Structure-wise, we could go above 54 to 98, but part of the 3-4 black moving down and this ultimately this potential 3-4 blue moving down, we cannot break above 1998. That's a do not cross. The only one of these potential wave counts is the 1-2 magenta here that would allow for price to go breaking above 1998 and could allow for price to do what? Go all the way back up here to 2104. Because this is my 2 and all of this is subdividing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to give me a 1, then my 2 could not only go above 1998, it could go above 2074.50, but cannot go above 2104. That's why that's in here. So please remember, when you see price must stay below this, if it breaks 98, then it's this. Elizabeth, we're not coming to join you, honey. In fact, we're going back to the punch-drunk euphoria, and we're breaking new all-time highs again. No, it has to break 98, 2074, 2104. That really puts a damper in things, and if I break 2104 moving to the upside, then I'm looking at this as, Houston, we have a problem. But again, the weekly must turn, trend momentum PAI, that monthly trend momentum PAI must turn, and I'm still going to require another surge above 2133. So what's that? About another 30-point hike to break 2133. Then I'll take this serious moving towards 2500, ultimately 2250, 2500 in the coming years. Any questions? So we know what this would look like, but we also know it's extremely unlikely. No way, shape, or form should we break 1998, 2074, and 2104, much less to go on and break 2133. But even if we take a couple of those out, 2104 and 2133 up here is going to be tough sledding because it's tried numerous times to take those out and it's failed. So let me put a little box up here. This little zone up here is ridiculously strong. And I'm not implying, Al and others, that we're going to go down there. I mean, we're going to rally all the way up there. But should it, it's still got a very long way to go in order to have any potential. It's going to have to break through it. And this is extremely tough area to tackle. And we'll put pink for resistance in the red family. So no, I would not expect price to go breaking above this. And we're going to struggle to break 1998. And we may even see, a little something, maybe the 1954 area. Why 54? That's the next battle zone between where price is and where price can go. And that's the top of the cloud. Everybody clear? So Gary, where, if my daily stays up, my 4-hour engages, where should I expect price to run? First target would be the previous high at 1943. Second target, 1954. At which point, if I get my daily trend momentum and PAI turning over, that correction is done, stick a fork in him, and we're starting to stair step our way down towards our previous swing points. My first take profit would be 1898. Which represents this swing point low. My second target would be down here at 1800. And then once I take 1898, 1800 out, daily moves from overbought to oversold, overbought to oversold. My weekly starts engaging back over, trend momentum PAI down on the monthly, on the daily, the weekly, and the monthly. Then we're going to shoot for not only 1898 first target, 1800 second target, 1803, whatever that low was. We're going to shoot for 1730, 1647. So So let me repeat that one more time. Once we turn over and the daily trend momentum PAI are down, we're going to sell rallies in a downtrend. We're going to target this 1898 swing point here first. We're going to target our swing point low at 1803, basically rounded off 1800. And then we're going to shoot for 1730/1647. Black Gold, Texas T, the Beverly Hillbillies. And it looks like we need a new contract. Let me see. Yes, it looks like it's time for a new contract. Everyone remember how to update your contract, whether it's Windsor Direct or any other one that's on a futures contract where you have an expiration date. So we'll go here to File, go to, no, I'm sorry, we go to, that's if you need a new account. This is where you go for updating your contract. You go to your Market Watch. It's the in my case, the third icon from the left. It says Market Watch when I hover over it. I open up Market Watch. Once it's open, I can right key click, hide all, and it should hide everything but the chart you have open. Right key click, show all, and we scroll down to see if there is a new oil contract. And there should be, because price is not ticking on the one I'm seeing. So there we go. Everybody see it? Oil 0416. So what do? We highlight it. And we see all this information on the chart. All I got to do is click and drag it, drop it onto this current chart, and it'll update the contract without removing all of my artwork or my homework or any other updates I made to that chart. So it'll say waiting for update for a few seconds, and then lo and behold, we're back to this potential area, and we're watching for price it's going to do, right? We're now at $32, and we've rallied from the swing point high. We're stair-stepping lower, and are we going to break down, or we still got a little more to go? We'll review that in a moment. But I want to go, and I'm going to do all of my oil charts, waiting for update. You simply click and drag. Takes a few seconds, and lo and behold, we have that one done. Turn that on. And the last one should take even a little bit longer because this has the software on it. But I simply left key click, drag. And if you notice closely on my little cursor, there's a little envelope. I let go, and it updates the chart information to the latest contract. And now we have tick data. So what did we say about our good friend oil? And I'll go ahead and close Market Watch. Simply click on that little icon to close Market Watch. And there we go. Okay? So my daily is moving from oversold towards overbought. We're going to look for this to end when the daily starts turning. We'll notice red, blue are starting to turn. Money flow definitely changed angle. So let me move my little sign over here. But it's not quite flat, nor is it hooked yet. So it may be that this rally back up is over and we're reversing down, but we need to see the 4-hour not only continue to move from overbought toward oversold, but go all the way into oversold territory. And if that does unfold, then we're going to look for this daily to engage down, and we'll call this correction over and a trend resumption of the downtrend. All right? So let's go back to what we talked about last week. We didn't know whether this 3-4 was over, and we're moving down in 5. And so far we got a 1-2 going down, but notice we were able to break that high. The swing point high here was 33.58. Between last month's contract and this month's contract changed by a penny, but the swing point high there during that little move was in fact, it broke a new high. So we can't say we had a 3, 4, 1, 2, 3 going up and 4 here because we broke that high. Doesn't mean the 4 is still unfolding. That's more than likely because it's probably my A, my B, and my C. And we're looking at 4 either being over now or perhaps a little more. But then we're going to expect a resumption of the downtrend. When did we say that we expected this move higher would end? Whether or not it was a 1-2-1-2 scenario and 3 of 3 down. Well, obviously we can't have a 1-2-1-2 because this again broke a new high here, making a high of 34.18 over my previous swing point high of this wave 2 there of 33.58. So this 3 of 3 down is off the table. So I'll take this out of the picture. Cancel. Let's delete it. And I will move this because we do not have a subdividing wave count just yet. So this is more than likely my 3 A, B, C. 4's correcting over here. Right? So we can start to clean this up a little bit. Let me get that 4. Oops, cancel that. I want the 4 blue. Get rid of U. And this could be my ABC, which I should change colors. But you get my point. I'll just take that out. And this is my A wave. Well, let's make this so it looks a little neater. I'll change this to green. Make it a prettier color. B. Green. And C. Green. Oops. Move that one out of the way. Now get to the C. Now this will be a sea green. And you think, what is he doing? Well, I'm just color coordinating this. If this is my 3, we got a little ABC, and that's an A. Then we got a little ABC, that's a B. And we're working on a little ABC for this one. Or a 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe we got another push higher for 5. Everybody good so far? So Gary, what are you doing? This is what I do every day. When I look at the charts, I have to update this information based on latest price action. And this should be another A, and we'll turn that to green. Because price proved itself not being a 1-2-1-2. That's more than likely 4 ABC, continuing in 4. And then this will be my B wave in green. And my C wave in green. Make a duplicate, change this to C green and leave my B magenta. C green. All right. So everybody good now? So what do we have, Gary? We got a 3. We got an ABCA, ABCB, and either an ABC finishing this up, or this could be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scenario, as we got a little 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is my 5 over, or we're expanding this to go a little higher. So the only question we have now is whether or not this 4, and I'll move this out of the way and delete it. And I'll remove this one out of the question, because if this is A, B, and C, we're likely to see a little more push, but it is possible that this ended slightly truncated, a few cents off of the previous high, because when I have ABC in this format, it should go back toward the previous high. Came very close, few cents shy of that, but it also could grind right back up and end up over here. So you'll recognize what this means. If this is 3 ABC, either over we're going down, or is this going to be another little push, then we're down. The same rule will apply as we talked about with the S&P, and what is that? When my daily turns over, it's over. and it's working on it. Early stages of working on it. So I'm watching as hint, 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 oil price is going to go sideways to lower. My 4 hours down, my 1 hour's down, my 30 is down, my 15's pushing down. So I expect to see sideways to lower movement on black gold Texas T for the moment, time being. And as my 4 hour continues to push and push, if it's able to go from overbought to oversold, and the daily does engage, then we're going to look for this to be over and downtrend continuation unfolds. Well, what if the red and the blue kind of, it's hooked and flat, and then this stays up? Then we're going to look to buy a 4 hour slingshot in the coming hours. Everybody good? So if my daily doesn't turn, what do? We buy the next 4 hour slingshot. If the daily doesn't turn, what do? We buy the 4 hour slingshot. And notice the last couple of times. Grinded, made a nice rally. Grinded, made a nice rally. So is this the end and the 4 hours over? Well, guess what? If the daily doesn't turn and we get a 4 hour slingshot, then I want to buy it. Well, what if, Gary, we don't get a 4 hour slingshot to buy and we go from overbought to oversold? Then I suspect this is going to get a backdraft, a wind behind its sails, and we will have the daily join forces. All right, so hint, 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 I expect oil prices to go sideways to lower as the foreman and workforce finish the down cycle. The question is it going to be enough to pull the daily with it? It's working on it. Red's hooking, blue's flattening to slightly hooking. Green money flow is clearly changing angle, but we're no cigar just yet. No cigar just yet. But again, if the 4 hour is able to move from overbought to oversold, the trend momentum moves from overbought to oversold, then I suspect this is the end and it's over. It's possible this could be over, and in the interim, I'm going to watch the reaction of the daily. That's all we do, right, Al? My 4 hours depressurizing down, so yes, I expect oil price to move sideways to lower, but is it going to be enough to force this to turn down? If the answer is no, and we get a 4 hour slingshot back up, then you want to scalp that. If the answer is I don't get a 4 hour slingshot to buy, then on the short trade, I'm going to continue to let it run. Because if my 4 hour does move from overbought to oversold, and I don't get a 4 hour slingshot back up, then it's going to force this daily to join. Fair enough? So my bias is oil prices are going lower. The question is it going to be low enough to force the daily to go and continue? Or are we going to see another one of these little dips? So watch the swing point low here at 31.32. And watch the swing point low here at 30.65. Those two are very important levels, because if we start to break this 31.32 here, followed by this 30.65 there, then it's starting to show signs and symptoms of perhaps that correction is over and we're breaking down. So what's my initial sign and symptom the correction is over? We go breaking this 30.65. Let me get the exact number. 30.65 is correct. So I'm going to go in here and make that 30.65 exact. That's that swing point low. So if we go down breaking the previous low here and this 30.65, then that's a good strong sign and symptom. We are topping and reversing. And the only way I see us breaking down below that and breaking this line here, what do we have? Purple and gold together? To break 30.65, to go on and break the 30.64 purple line, and my gold line sitting a few cents less at 30.11. The only way to go breaking these two would be with the daily's help. So if we start breaking that 30.65 down, we go down to 30.11, and we break that down, then yes, you could bet you the daily's engaging and starting its way down. So in closing, look for price to chop up and down sideways to lower as the foreman and workforce move from overbought toward oversold. And if we're able to muster enough price action to drop about $1 and we break into that 30 handle, 30.11, then $1.60, whatever that is. If we go breaking below the purple and the gold line, then set your sights on the previous swing point low of 26, headed lower, opening up our targets long term of 12 to 14. Okay? So is this the end of the road? It might be, but I want to see the foreman and workforce continue to push lower. I want to see price break that 31.32. I want to see price break that 30.65 and ultimately come down and break this 29.50 area. That sets the tone if we go down and break those, because once we break that 29.30 range, that's the purple and gold line on the Ichimoku. It's a battle zone sitting here on this chart. Say hello to 26 and say hello to stair-stepping lower towards 12 to 14. Any questions on gold? Black gold anyway, and we'll get to gold in just a second. I can't guarantee that's the end, Al, because if my daily doesn't turn, the 4-hour engages back up. We could rally back towards the scene of the crime, 34.79 area, maybe a little bit higher. But if my 4-hour does move from overbought to oversold, the daily does engage, consider this over, and continue to sell the rallies in a downtrend. In the interim, price is going to continue to go sideways to lower, hint, 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 as my 15:30, 1-hour, 4-hour, and daily continue to move downward. Is it going to be enough to force the slingshot? Only time will tell. And I'll start to get my feel goods breaking below 31.32. Breaking below 30.65, and then let's go to Ichimoku so you can see what those are lining up. Here's the two lines. We go breaking 30.64, we go breaking 30.11. Then yes, as we get a daily close below those two, no questions asked, we're going to 26 in a stair-stepping fashion, and once we reach 26, we're going below that. Weekly, I suspect the weekly is going to re-engage when the daily starts its downward descent, and my monthly is just hanging, waiting for the daily and weekly to get it together, but I suspect we have further downside to go. So nothing about this equation tells me that we have a massive bottom reversal intact yet. I still think we got further downside to go. Whether or not, ladies and gentlemen, Stacy, we get all the way to 12 to 14, we need to take one trade at a time, one day at a time, one chop, chop, chop sideways to move lower as the time frame cycle. But again, we'll call this correction over when the daily trend momentum and PAI flip. And we're working on it, but not quite confirmed yet. So what's a confirmation? Not only the daily trend momentum and PAI start engaging and moving lower, but we take out those lows we just mentioned, 31.32, 30.65, ultimately this 29.50 battle zone area, and then lo and behold, we'll go to 26, and we're going to go lower. How low? We'll take it one day at a time, but this is a long-term projection. It is not a prediction, but a projection, and anticipated subdividing wave counts should move us down. Well, let's see if this is over. And then we'd come down with wave 5 blue, 3 black, 4, 5. So we'll be able to give you more insight at how far down we're going to go if this is still valid. Once we get 3, 4 moving down and 5, we'll be able to reproject that target. It may move up, but it still could stay about the same. So again, look for side of 26 and below. Gold. Gold is in the process of rallying. And is this over and this wave 4 done? I don't think so. I think this is part of this wedge formation. So if you're long gold, I'd be peeling off some profits, because we're likely to see it not go up and break this previous high over here at 12.39. We're likely to see it make a lower high, then head back down in this wedge formation. And a likely place for this to reach resistance is this blue little trend line, and we're looking for this 3. Our wave 4 is still unfolding in an A, B, C, D, then back down in E. At which point 4 is done, and we start bang zoom targeting 1317 and then 1339. So Al and others, we talked about this down move on 3 and this end being 4. I said it's very unlikely that 4 would have ended here. It looks too impulsive straight down, that should be the beginning of an A, a B, and perhaps a C down. Well, this still could be my A, my B, and so far we got a 1, 2, and we're working on a 3, 4, 5 subdividing wave count in this C down here. So no rule to say that we can't go to this original target zone of 1174, 1184. But if this turns out to be a wedge, then we can't go that low anymore, right? Because what? If this is the end of my C wave down here at 1201, then when D is over moving down in E, we can't break below 1201. So I'm going to draw a couple of little lines in here for everyone. Even though we got a wedge formation, I want you to put your little thin line, and you can make it green if you like, and the green family, to show that that is currently support. And let's make it green. And the number was, I think, what did I say, 1201? So parameter is 1201. And I don't remember what the change was. We'll check that out in just a second. 1201, and this swing point low is exactly 1201.83. 1201.83. So let's update that to 1201.83. So on this Windsor Direct platform, calculating gold, we got a swing point high, we came down, got a swing point low, it looks like an A wave. We rallied up strongly to a B wave. We came down strong for a C wave. Now we're bouncing what appears to be a D wave. And again, if this is my C wave here and my D wave does find resistance, and I'm going to put my resistance line in just a second, and we start moving back down in the E wave, then we're not allowed to go breaking below 1201.83. Everybody good so far? Now what about this swing point high? If this is my A and that's my B here, then the swing point high of 1239.61, 1239.61. So I'm going to place a little red line here at 1239.61, 1239.61. And I'll make that line a little bit thinner so it's not too bold. There we go. And I'll even thin this green line out a little bit so you know that has to do with the wedge formation, analyzing if we're in an A, B, C, D, E wedge formation and what it represents. So everyone, please join me and adding these levels to your chart. Please add 1201.83. That represents what appears to be an A, B, C bottom. 1201.83. Moving up in D. And my D wave cannot go any higher than 1239.61. I can't have a wedge formation in which it breaks above 1239.61. If this is a wedge, it should honor staying below 1239.61, giving me a lower high. Then it should honor in this wedge formation moving back down a higher low above 1201.83. So far we have a potential 3 A, B, C working on D, then reversing back down in E to finish wave 4. Then we start to target 1317 followed by 1339. I don't think this move here was over, and we got too much chopping, overlapping, sideways movement for that to be over there. But I guess it's possible it's over, and this is part of a 1-2 going higher in 3. So we need to see not only it break this 1239.61, but obviously go on to break this 1263. that would be helpful to say that perhaps this is over. But because it breaks that high does not mean that is over. This wave B could be a more substantial correction. And remember the rule like on the pound. If we got an expanded flat correction, 3A, B, we still could come all the way back down in C even though we break a higher high. Fair enough? But signs and symptoms leading us down that path would be for price to continue to rally to break 1239 area, go on to break the previous high at 1263. Those two signs back to back would be maybe this 4 is done. But it's still a possibility. Could be my A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, B, or an A, B, C, B, then down in C. Well, John, yep, press F5. That'll let you come back out and go out and come back in. F5, function F5. And if you can't hear me, then type that in, Trish. Function F5. So for future reference, ladies and gentlemen, if you lose sound, like John Younghusband said he lost sound, then you push F5, function F5. It'll force you out of the room and right back in. All right, so any questions on gold? Is this my A, B, C, D, E? Then we go up. Is this the end of the road? We're already starting to go up. The likelihood of 4 being over here is very low probability. The likelihood of 4 continue either in this wedge or a more substantial flat correction, expanded flat correction, is greater potential than it being over here. So I still say we got more sideways movement, probably for a few more days, if not longer, to finish this correction before the resumption of the uptrend. All right, everybody good so far? Well, now let's go to the software. Software, hello, hey, how you doing? Well, why are we moving up? We're moving up because the 4-hour changed directions. Slingshot higher, and we see what? Trend momentum crossing back to the upside. But it's also moving higher, in which we had a daily engage up, fail. Everybody good? So we had a high, a lower high, and we didn't get the lower low yet, but we did have the function of a slingshot up that failed and turned and hooked out. And if this ends up being my wedge, then what's ultimately going to happen? It's going to engage, disengage, and then finally finish my A, B, C, D, E, then re-engage and blow doors to the upside as 3, 4 would be over. Now we're going up. My weekly is in the process of still moving up, but it's starting to show signs of turning. Red, green are hooked. Green's flattening a little bit. So this could be the beginning of a much more substantial downtrend correction. So that's why I'm not going to tell you right off the bat, based on this bouncing wedge formation, that as soon as I go up in D, down in E, then we're busting doors up this way. This could be part of that A, B, moving much lower in C. And if my weekly turns over, remember, based on where this 1, 2, 3 is, this wave 4, Al, could correct all the way back down to 1081. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line here up at 1081, give you an exact number, high of 1081.64. Not too bad. 1081.61. Let's make it 64. 1081.64. $1081.64. All right, that represents my little 1, 2 magenta. Everybody see it? 1 up, 2 down, subdividing 3, 4. Is 4 in a wedge? Is 4 going to be like expanded flat? Or is it going to turn into something much more substantial, like a combination, double zigzag, etc., where we continually move price much further and deeper, more time consuming? Because again, this wave 4 is possible that it could come all the way down to 1081. Because remember, my 1, 2, 3, wave 4 could go all the way to the area of wave 1, but no lower. So we need to say price must stay above 1081.64. No questions asked. Price must stay above 1081.64. So far, so good. So what happens, as I mentioned before, is gold definitely bottomed and reversed? Or is this going to start to fizzle manizzle and turn back down with the weekly and go blowing past 1081, not 1082. Typo. 1081, sorry. 1081.64. And we go blowing past that, then it could be that this is not over. This is part of a greater correction. And then wave A still completes way over here. So what is it, Gary? What I've been telling you to do with gold? I think we're in an uptrend. Because why do we think we're in an uptrend? Because my weekly turn from oversold to overbought, we went rallying strongly, and it was enough to force the monthly to turn and go up. I got a trend momentum PAI up on the monthly. All right, trigger higher. We're going higher. Woohoo! And toward overbought territory. So are we about to see a big correction down and the weekly starts to turn with it? Or are we going to simply get this daily to re-engage and start blowing doors to new highs? That certainly could unfold, and it could be part of my A, B, C, D, E, and we re-engage and we go breaking new highs. So you can see structurally, when I put this on the chart, it's not confusing, but structurally what can happen? Well, my 4 could end here and go higher. I could have a different type of combination where we go higher first and then come way down. And if this is 1, 2, 3, we still could have 4 go way down here. But in order for gold to drop another $150 plus 220 to 12 is 20 to another 120 and 20, about $140, 140, 50 range. If we come all the way down here, then obviously the weekly is going to need to turn. Right, Stacy? No way, shape, or form is gold going to stair-step its way down to even making a run at 1081, much less go below it without that weekly turning over to the downside. So if my weekly, even though it's overbought currently, does not turn over, and just kind of sits there and flattens out. Remember, we can have flat to up, flat to up, flat to up. Then I'm still going to continue to buy daily slingshots, right? Just like the last one when it engaged was a nice little hardy move. Went from a low of 1190 up to a high of 1239. Well, Marty, that's almost a what? 60-point move. $60 move on gold. You know that is cha-ching, cha-ching, cashola. Well, rules still apply. We want to buy the daily slingshot. Yeah, we want to buy it. Especially if this weekly is flat to up. Flat to up. Flat to up. And right now, just because it's starting to change and flatten out does not mean it is the beginning of the big one, Elizabeth, and we're coming all the way back down, but it also could be the start. So that's why I'm going to look for signs and symptoms, and I'm going to trade my line of progression. So in closing, I want you to buy the daily slingshot should it engage back up. When it does engage, it could be the part of this A, B, C, D, and we go down a little bit more to E, and then the daily engages and my little wedge is over, and boom, we not only bust the levels we should not cross up here, but we go on to take the high out and we start stair stepping to 1317, 1339. If not, and the daily decides, well, I tried it once and I failed, I'm going to move all the way from overbought to oversold, overbought to oversold, and it does, in fact, force this to start moving lower, 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 and lower. Then, just because the weekly starts turning over and we even get this to flatten out, and we do move lower, We're going to watch if my weekly starts to turn over. All eyes will be on the monthly. Everybody good? All eyes, Stacy, will be on the monthly. Is the monthly going to turn and engage over and we go breaking new lows again like we've done over and over and over and over? And this is just another hardy retracement before we do the same thing? Or is this truly the end and we're on a long-term multi-year rally as we're working on that A going up in B? Only time will tell, right? So what can I do? I don't care if it's over here moving higher or it's not over and it's still going to come down here. I know I play the cycles. Well, there's no way this rally up is going to turn down and make new lows without the monthly. Everybody just write that note. Al, little sticky note. No way gold is going to go breaking 1046 heading to 1,000 and below without the monthly. Not going to happen. It must have the monthly's help. So, is this the beginning of that? Or is this the end of the road and we're going to see the weekly turn over, slingshot higher and higher as the monthly goes, nope, I've been oversold for years now, month after month after month after month after month after month after month. I'm done. I'm going back to overbought. Then say hello to A going up to B. Okay, John, y'all got that? Stacy, Al, Andres, John Younghusband, Bob H., Ian, Harold Glenn, Bill Walterstorff, all of our students in archive, and hundreds of others. Is it over? Well, if my monthly does not turn, then yes. Well, what if my weekly turns over, the monthly says no, then we're going to start to salivate to buy weekly slingshots higher in the weeks to come. In the interim, we still have a monthly trend momentum PAI up and we got a weekly trend momentum PAI flat to up, but close enough. Trend momentum 1 and 2 up, PAI flat, but flat to up is still buy the daily slingshot. So my trade alert is to say based on the monthly trend momentum and PAI up, based on the weekly trend momentum 1 and 2 up and the PAI flat, I'm going to buy the daily slingshot. No ifs, no buts, no ands. But we're likely, if this is the wedge formation down here, let's go back to this. If this is my wedge formation, we're likely to see price honor going no higher than 1239, get another little pullback towards no lower than 1201, then the daily re-engage and start to process, okay, it was 3, and this is my ABCDE 4 done, and now we're going up here to 1317/1339. Well, again, in order for us to move way up here, 100 plus more dollars, we're going to need not only the weekly continue up, but likely to depressurize and slingshot higher. Fair enough? We're going to need the weekly not only to continue up, but likely to depressurize and slingshot higher to get up here. Well, what would it take the daily? The daily is going to have to engage, make new highs, and engage and engage and engage. So we could sit here and buy daily slingshots over and over and over while the weekly continues to move higher and maybe depressurizes the slingshot higher, forcing the daily slingshot higher and higher. But you get the drift. We're not likely to see gold move 100 plus 130 whatever plus dollars, 120 plus dollars without not only the weekly staying up, the monthly staying up, but the daily slingshotting higher and higher and higher. And even likely to see the weekly slingshot higher along the way. If this is the end and we got one of these much larger corrections and could even turn into, nope, this is not A here, it's still over here, then we're going to need the weekly absolutely to turn and hook down, trend momentum PAI down. And we're also going to need what? The weekly trend momentum in PAI to move down, but we're going to require it to move from overbought all the way to oversold. Overbought all the way to oversold. And if I end up getting the weekly, John Younghusband, to depressurize, James, and move from overbought to oversold, trend momentum from overbought to oversold, then yes, I expect to see the monthly turn with it. Fair enough? But that's a big if. to get the weekly to turn over to start, much less to move week after week after week after week after week after week, usually on generally taking a few months, right? Not just a week or two. It takes a few months to move from overbought toward oversold. So we would basically need months of downside pressure in order to not only make the PAI flip, but to force the trend momentum to cross and move from overbought to oversold. So yes, if I get that and the monthly engages, then I'll go back to update the chart and say, nope, this isn't the A here. We're subdividing and continuing further. So Bob, I think you got the visual picture, the Picasso, if you will, the MPA PE3 Picasso of what it would take for A not to be done and to move further to the downside toward 1,000 and below, or B, if A is correct and it's over now, how are we going to go ranging up for the next few years higher? Then we're going to need the monthly to say no, stay up, trend momentum PAI up when the weekly turns over. And what happens when a monthly stays up and a weekly turns over? We can go back to the previous uptrend, which I got to turn the auto scroll off and scroll back in time. But there was a period in which the monthly was going higher, and what did my weekly do? Slingshot higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and higher, right? Wasn't that long ago it was doing that. I mean, a few years ago, but wasn't that long ago we were in this tear to the upside as we rallied all the way towards that 2000 range. But this certainly could return back to, maybe not that many times, but certainly could to return back to A being done going up in B over the next year or two. And the weekly slingshotting higher and higher and higher. So back to our strategy. Strategy is what? Well, because I have a monthly trend momentum in PAI up, so we'll go to the monthly while I speak about it. I will turn my auto scroll back on to keep things into perspective. So while we have a monthly trend momentum in PAI up, and while we have a weekly trend momentum and basically a flat PAI, but both are still up, the line of progression is screaming to buy the daily slingshots. Not just stating it, but screaming it. So I'm going to leave you with this. We know we're going to buy the daily slingshot today, tomorrow, next week. Doesn't matter when it engages, we're buying. We're going to keep an eye on price action. Is it able to go break up above 1239.61 and break this wedge buster? Or is it going to break down below and break below 1201? Right? What's it going to do? Or is it going to stay in between here, finish this wedge, go up, make a new lower high, come back down, make a new higher low, then the daily engages and we buy that. Bottom line is, I don't care what price does, it goes up here and then comes back down to daily engages, or it stays in this wedge and comes back down, then engages, or it comes down and breaks below here and heads down, then engages. I'm buying for as long as that weekly trend momentum and PAI are flat to up, up, or flat to up, I'm still buying. And again, I don't think 4 ended here. Even if we go breaking the wedge to the upside, I think this is part of an A and an A, B, C moving higher in B. Or if we go and we start breaking down below, then I think we got an A and a B, and then we're working on a 1, 2 down in 3, making the C here. So we could break the wedge to the downside and still be wave 4. We can break the wedge to the upside and still be wave 4 unfolding. I need a lot more than just price breaking the wedge to say, okay, this 4 is done. I need that weekly not only continuing higher, but the daily starting to slingshot making higher highs and slingshot making higher highs. And I'll leave you with one last thought. What if we do go breaking the wedge above this 1239 and actually break above 1263? That could still be part of an expanded flat correction, which would allow us to still come back down this way for a correction before turning over. But again, what's going to be the key? The weekly turning over. In order for us to go down $100 and make a run from $12.25 or $60, $70 down to $11.80, $11.70 and below, we're going to need that weekly turning. Fair enough? So if the weekly doesn't turn, it stays flat to up, buy the daily slingshot. Whether or not it breaks the wedge or whether or not it doesn't engage until we go up and then back down, then it engages, still buy it, and we're going to target the previous swing points. And ultimately, if this ends up being the wedge and it's over, it should not only start to stair step its way higher, break the new high, but continue to work its way towards 1317/1339. And if not, my weekly says, nope, I'm done, stick a fork in me, I'm depressurizing. Then when we talk about the weekly trend momentum PAI headed down now, we can't throw out the fact that it's definitely a coming down below 1,000 and below. We need to see how, as the weekly turns and moves lower and price starts to move down, it still could be a deeper correction for this wave 4. But more importantly, we're going to need to keep an eye on when the weekly does turn, not only the PAI but the trend momentum, is it enough to influence the monthly? And if the answer is no, then we salivate and buy weekly slingshots higher. And if I see the monthly ignore it and say, nope, I'm going from oversold, overbought, oversold, overbought, then when the weekly comes down to push price lower, great, and we get a big slingshot back up, that's when you should buy GDX, GGN, GLD, UGL, any of the other gold plays, because that's a sign and symptom of a bottom reversal and the trend reversal to the upside. Monthly up, weekly slingshot coming down, or weekly trend momentum BAI turning down, monthly ignoring it, then the weekly slingshotting back up. That is a perfect time to buy and get into those plays. Any questions? So in closing, one more time, we're going to buy the daily slingshot today, tomorrow, next week, next month. Don't care when it engages, I'm buying. In the interim, should the weekly turn over, should the weekly PAI not only officially start hooking down from flat to truly down, but we force it enough to turn and head down to the point where the trend momentum crosses, and we got a trend momentum PAI down on the weekly, then all eyes will be peeled on the monthly to see if it's going to react to it or ignore it. And as price definitely moves lower, when a weekly trend momentum and PAI move lower, price is going down. And we'll get a much better buying opportunity if it is up being, that's the bottom, we got a low, a high, a higher low. Weekly slingshots back up, monthly says no, then we buy and go long and hold for quite some time. All right. John Younghusband. How about our good friend, the Euro Pound? I think I have a Euro. Yeah, there it is. Euro Pound. To no one's surprise, we're seeing long term, right? Weekly struggling because it's struggling as it depressurizes to go higher. It's struggling to depressurize because the monthly is so strongly to the upside. So that's why I still say long term, will it go all the way to the cloud? Will it go above the cloud? Or is it going to end up fizzle manizzle and the weekly turns over and the monthly says, nope, I'm going back down, and we come all the way back down this way? Well, Gary, that's a huge difference. Higher, much higher, or flip and go much, much, much lower. Signs and symptoms. Signs and symptoms. So my monthly trend momentum and PAI up. My weekly is still flat to up. Flat to up. So what's the line of progression? Buy daily slingshots. Amen? Buy daily slingshots. And prices rally. Came down to purple line, bounced. Got a little bit of a pullback. Said, nope, not quite. Boom. Still going higher. It broke to new highs. And I'm working on another new high over to the right. Is it going to finish this one? Or is this another part of a little A, B, C, D, E wedge? And then it ends up, bottom line is very similar to gold. I don't know if this is a wedge formation. This is part of my A down, B up. We come down and C again before we make a new high. Or again, it's a wedge, but we still expect a higher high longer term no matter what. That's because the monthly trend momentum and PAI are up. And so far, my weekly has shown signs of that. By trying to go against the monthly up, reversed, and as it started to top and roll, it slingshotted up once, not much of one, but did angle down, then angle back up. Now it's in the midst of trying it again, but it's struggling to depressurize because we were able to get another daily slingshot out of this. So you want to continue with the line of progression. Continue to buy daily slingshots to the upside for as long as my weekly trend momentum and PAI are flat to up. And look, we're trying to cross over and head down, but no cigar. And we're trying to depressurize, but my daily keeps slingshotting up. So let's keep buying it. Fair enough? So I can't guarantee that that's the end of this correction and we're going to go blowing new highs yet. But I still think no matter what, we should break new highs. And even if this weekly starts to depressurize and the trend momentum starts to head down, then just like gold, you want to keep an eye on the trend momentum PAI on the monthly. If it ignores it, then we're going to look for another correction further down, longer term, more time consuming, but then look for a weekly slingshot up in the coming weeks. Because if my monthly says no to a weekly's depressurization, the weekly will be forced to go back up like it's already done once. And we went down here, for example, a low of 75.24 to a high of 76.60. So over 200 pips. Not too shabby, especially on the euro pound, such a high dollar volume per pip. So any questions here? Well, Gary, is this going to break, or is this part of my little A down, my little B up, and we're working on a C down later? Watch the weekly. And as my daily cycles, right, what happens if we fail and turns and hooks out again? Well, it hooked up, it turned and hooked out. Well, if that happens again, then you can sell that for a quick scalp down. And we're likely to see that part of an A, B, C, B, and maybe another little A, B, C, C coming back down. So A, I want to buy this. Well, it's already engaging, so if I didn't buy it now, I can't buy it this late in the game. Why? My 1 hour is getting back toward overbought. My 30's back toward overbought. My 15's back toward overbought. So it's a little late to get into the buying the slingshot at the moment. But I'm going to watch closely as my 15:30 1 hour finish its cycle. Is it enough? And will it force this daily to disengage? So if I end up with another high, low, lower, high, daily disengages, sell it for a scalp. Let me repeat that. If I get the daily to turn and hook out again as my foreman and workforce move from overbought toward oversold, and I see the daily disengage down here and turn out, then I'm going to sell it for another scalp down and expect this to continue further in either a triangle, A, B, C, D, E scenario, or perhaps this is part of an A, B, then moving down into C, but I can sell it. So I can buy the next slingshot when it happens. Up and until then, if it disengages when the foreman and workforce top and roll, then I can scalp that back to the downside. And I'm watching closely at that swing point high. So go ahead and put your little line up here at that swing point high. And that high was 78.95. 78.95. 78.95. 78. 78957.7 to be exact. 78957. So there's my swing point high. This could be part of a wedge, so we go lower highs and higher lows, A, B, C, D, E. So we should see very little limited upside still. If it is a wedge, if not, we could go higher and still fail, meaning the daily goes up a little further. Yes, we go up and we head towards that previous high, but no cigar. It turns and hooks out. Then I can go back short. I would shoot for my first target back here at 79.48. 77.94. Sorry, I read that wrong. 77.94. If my daily turns and hooks out, my first line will be the purple, the gold line here, turning out, headed lower. I'd shoot for 77.94. If it breaks that, then we're likely to run to the purple line at 77.09. And it could be that we get a much deeper correction anyway, Daily turns and hooks out, daily moves from overbought to oversold, thus forcing the weekly to start to depressurize, and we get a much deeper retracement. Then I'll stay in that short trade and continue to let it go further, knowing that as long as that monthly stays up, we're going to eventually look to buy a weekly slingshot back up. But it may take what? My weekly depressurizing, A, and B, my daily going from overbought all the way to oversold. So in closing on the euro pound, a great scalping opportunity to the downside would be if this daily slingshot fails and we don't go breaking above 78.95, which is basically what, 60 whatever more pips. So if we don't go breaking above that swing point high over here, then we're going to expect this to fail, turn and hook out. Should it do so, look to then go short, scalp down to the 77.94. Second target would be the purple line sitting there at 77.09. If we break both of those, and that means my daily is moving from overbought to oversold, turning and hooking out all the way to oversold, all the way to oversold, and my weekly does in fact start to depressurize, then we could not only, John Young husband, break the purple line here, we can make a run toward the top of the cloud. Amen? And during that period of my weekly depressurizing and my monthly staying up, then I would look to maybe buy off the cloud as my weekly would then slingshot back up because my monthly didn't turn. So this is how you look at, and you don't even see wave counts on here, but you get the drift of what we're talking about. I can give you wave counts, or I can just let the cycling time frames tell you the answers in advance. And I know what to look for. This turns and hooks out. We don't break a new high. I sell it, targeting the first goal line. I reach that target, it continues. I circle the purple line. If it reaches that target and my weekly starts to turn over and head lower, and my daily's moving from overbought to oversold, then we could come all the way down and start targeting perhaps the top of the cloud down here at 75. Okay? All right. So in closing, I want to thank everyone for wishing Trish a happy birthday. It's going to be a big celebration today. My mother's birthday is Thursday, which is tomorrow. No, it's tomorrow. My mother's birthday is tomorrow. It's Wednesday. My mother's birthday is tomorrow, and my birthday is on Friday. So 1, 2, 3, back to back to back, with the Thursday's class in between. So in closing, thank you for your time and attention. Al, whether or not we sit here and we laboringly go through potential wave counts, or we potentially say it could be an A, a B, and a C, and maybe it's over now. Maybe we got a little 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're working on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to go a little higher. That's why this could subdivide and go up further, or this could be over, or this could have been this wave 3, 4, but no price proved otherwise, that it has to be this. We just go with the flow and we follow the line of progression. So as I stated with black gold, look for it to chop up and down, drift sideways to lower first, up and until we get the cycles. And my monthly is flattening, that's okay. My weekly is still up right now. Doesn't mean it can't engage down in the days to come. We expect it will, but nothing of the two, as far as that weekly engaging down, will happen till the daily turns. Is this little down move the beginning of a high, low, lower, high, lower, low? That's why it's important we break the first line and we head towards the second one. So that 31.32 is important because it'd be nice to give me a high, low, lower, high, lower, low, and continue with the momentum and the daily turns over and starts heading down. Then yes, it's likely to be 4's over and we're stair-stepping down. Fair enough? But signs and symptoms. So continue, yes, sell the daily until it engages. Well, what if I don't get that and my 4-hour depressurized, my daily stays up? Then buy that 4-hour slingshot and look for another rally back up. Not $10, $15, $20 rally, but more back toward the previous high, back into the cloud scenario, toward the cloud. And if not, the 4-hour doesn't start to form and engage back up, it keeps going lower, then expect the daily will engage and continue with this down move. Until then, definitely chop up and down. That's what it's supposed to do as they're cycling. All right, so thank you again. I'm humbled and honored to be your mentor and instructor, and we appreciate each and every one of you, and we'll see you tomorrow on my mother's birthday. Take care.